home, born and raised, and haven't left. So probably won't be leaving anytime soon either. With the world that we're living in right now, pretty sure I'll be staying here for the near future. So hopping on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, YouTube today, obviously 716 day, July 16th. Born and raised in Buffalo, New York. You can obviously tell that I'm a big Buffalo Bills fan. Cover the Buffalo Bills on this podcast as well, covering the Buffalo Sabres on this podcast as well. And everybody that knows me knows that I cover mixed martial arts as well. So as bad as 2020 has been, the one cherry on the sundae, I guess you could say, is that the UFC has just trudged along. They haven't gone anywhere. They're not going anywhere. The UFC has been putting out events after event after event. They've been putting on some really good fights. So it got me thinking, out of the fights that we have seen thus far in the 2020 MMA year, what are some fights that I really want to see? What are some fights out there that I think make sense? And some fights out there in particular that I think fans would really want to see and that would agree with me universally that these are fights that are not only important for the UFC, important for the divisions, but important for the fighters' legacies. So I have the whiteboard, okay? I got the whiteboard. I got the whiteboard the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I'm definitely using this for the podcast. So 2020, top fights for the rest of 2020. Number one for me is Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. Oddly enough, out of these four fights, you see there that three of them are for a title. Israel Adesanya for, obviously, the middleweight champion. Israel Adesanya is the middleweight champ. He'd be taking on Paulo Costa. Costa, in his own right, is a unique fighter, a unique challenger, a worthy challenger, a worthy contender. And in terms of how this division has somewhat shaped out over the last year or so during this Israel Adesanya takeover, if you will, Paulo Costa is the best option available to defeat Israel Adesanya. In my personal opinion, I think that when you match these guys up, stylistically, Costa, a very tough matchup for Israel Adesanya. And obviously, in the case of Izzy, Izzy's the champ, but I think Izzy's the toughest matchup that Costa has ever had. That's a fight that I think we will get this year. That's a fight that hasn't been announced yet, so that's why it's on the board. Habib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje is number two. This is a fight that I personally think is further away than what I would hope. Further away in the sense that Habib Nurmagomedov's father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, just lost his life to a COVID-related illness, tested positive for COVID, and then ran into some troubles beyond that. The troubles that were that affected him largely, that were worsened, I guess you could say, due to his COVID. That's not my words. That's not me paraphrasing. That was what was widely reported by all the media outlets in Dagestan and in Russia. So my thoughts and prayers go out to Habib's family, Habib in particular, a great champ. That was tough. I'm not gonna lie. It was sad to hear that news because you know that Habib's father largely responsible for the career that Habib has had. You know, that's the reason why Habib is where he is as the undefeated fighter that he is today. So the challenger, though, would be Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje rattled off that big win over Tony Ferguson, took that fight on short notice. That was the first event that the UFC was able to get going during this whole COVID-19 just crazy times. So Habib and Gaichi were scheduled originally to fight in September. Dana White said in a recent interview that fight will happen in September, but I'm a little bit pessimistic on that. I think that this fight is actually going to drag out. I don't know if we're going to see this fight until maybe October, maybe November. And that is if Habib can sign on that bottom line. So, number 2 fight, Habib versus Gaichi. Number 3 fight would be Jon Bones Jones versus Dominic Reyes. I don't know what the hell is going on with Jon Jones. No one ever knows what the hell is going on with Jon Jones. I don't even think Jon Jones knows what the hell is going on with Jon Jones. So when the hell will Jon Jones even be back? I don't know. Big questions for that fight, but for that fighter and as to whether he'll fight or not. But one thing I do know is that this quote-unquote excuse or stance that Jon Jones is taking in regards to UFC fighter pay is one that is pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous. Because if you look at things recently that took place, Jorge Masvidal was also another fighter that was very frustrated with his pay. Jorge Masvidal was also another fighter that threatened to hold out within the UFC if he didn't get what he wanted. He got what he wanted because he stepped up to the plate. Jon Jones hasn't really done too much for the UFC. And it's not due to a lack of talent. The talent's there. It's not due to the fights themselves that have played out the way that they have. But what has Jon Jones actually done for the UFC? Really think about that. What has Jon Jones done for the UFC? Other than force the UFC to strip him of the belt not once but twice, other than pretty much embarrass the authorities, the powers that be, the authority figures, Dana White, the Fertitta brothers, WME, IMG, as well as himself. So Jon Jones isn't hurting anyone right now but himself. The UFC has proven so many times, but in particular with Jon Jones, that they can move on without him. They don't need Jon Jones. Jon Jones needs them. If Jon Jones goes to another organization, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, let's say Jon Jones goes to Bellator. Jon Jones is not as relevant in any other forum other than the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They are the world leader of MMA, the MMA leader. And they can move on, easily move on without him. They don't need Jon Jones. Part of me wonders if they even want Jon Jones. But if they do want Jon Jones, there's no doubt about it. On the dry erase board here, Jones versus Reyes 2. That should be the fight. Jones versus Reyes 2. That's the fight to make. That's the fight that should happen. I thought that Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones in that first fight. It was very close. Very similar situation to Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski Part 2. Very close. Challenger didn't get it. The champ got it. He won rounds 4 and 5, and the point of contention round was round 3. That sometimes happens in these 5-round fights. But I personally feel that Jon Jones could very well be ducking Dominic Reyes right now. Using this whole, we're going to do what's right for the fighters. We're going to try to create a better situation for the fighters, better fighter pay, better this, better that. I'm not really buying it, John. Not really buying it. I think that there's more at play there. I think some of it has to do with Dominic Reyes. The final fight on this board for a top 5 is Poirier. Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. 2 ? 155 or 170. Where will this fight take place? I don't know. Will it take place? I don't know. But what I do know is I think it should take place. And you break down that UFC 155-pound division, Habib, Justin Gaethje, that fight has to play itself out. Tony Ferguson lost to Justin Gaethje. I feel Tony Ferguson should fight another guy coming off of a loss in Dan Hooker. Hooker just lost to Dustin Poirier. Poirier needs another win to get back into a title shot against Habib, because Poirier lost to Habib. Conor lost to Habib. In order for two guys to get what they want, they got to fight one another. For Conor to win against Poirier, puts him right back into title contention against Habib. If Poirier beats Conor McGregor, puts him right back into title contention against Habib. So there's that common denominator and that common opponent that makes this fight doable. Whether Conor does it or not, people are saying that he's retired. I don't believe that for 1 second. I know he said he was retired, but he also said that he's still the king and blah, blah, blah. I don't think he's done. I think he's going to fight, and I think he's going to fight soon. Soon, actually. With Fight Island thriving the way that it is in Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, pay-per-view numbers, 1.3 million pay-per-view buys for Kamaru Usman as well as Jorge Masvidal. I think Conor sees that and says, hey, I can get a big, big piece of the pie if I come out of my quote-unquote retirement and make this a reality. I think Dustin Poirier makes sense for him at 155 or at 170. Poirier's a big guy. He could fight at 170 if Conor is on the thicker side. But I've watched Conor McGregor's Instagram lately, and he looks like he's looking pretty svelte. So I think 155 for Conor and Poirier, that would be a big fight. Be a fight that Poirier definitely deserves. Another crack at it. And you look at the arc of these fighters and their careers, Poirier is a much different fighter now than he was 6 years ago when he first fought Conor. And you can say the same thing for Conor, for better or for worse. Both of these guys are much, much different than what they were. So I'm Ryan Thomas. Those are some of my top UFC fights that I want to see take place throughout the rest of 2020. This year has sucked, no doubt about it. But if those fights happen, it could get a little bit better. For more of the Thomas Take Sports podcast, if you want to listen to audio episodes, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, if I didn't say it already. Every major platform, it's out there for your listening pleasure. This channel is here for your viewing pleasure. Thanks so much for tuning in, and take care. Stay safe, everybody.